Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Iyama has been unstoppable for the last 3 games in the Nongshim Cup, 27th Nongshim Cup. He has defeated Yang Kai-wen, who was a world champion that happened last year. Then he defeated Park Jung-hwan just a few days ago. Last game he defeated Ding Hao in a very long and tough battle. It's very well deserved. Today he's facing the number 1 from Korea and also the number 1 in the world right now, Shin Jinseo. Without further ado, Game 12 of the Nongshim Cup. Shin Jinseo is playing as black and Iyama is playing as white. The game starts out like this. Black approaches, white approaches, and here black presses white. White responds to it with a very simple joseki, and here black approaches. White presses, black crawls, white extends, and here black plays out the keima. That's also an AI approved joseki. So far so good. White approaches the top right corner, black plays the keima, and white plays the 3-space high extension to coordinate with the group on the bottom. And at this point, obviously, Shin Jinseo has to play on the bottom right because there's a big move missing here. White crawls, black extends, and here a lot of my viewers might be just playing a normal textbook move. Obviously, not too much is wrong with this move. However, because black has a very low stone over here, playing a move over here does not seem as valuable. A better idea is for white to get a sente locally and play somewhere else. That's exactly what Iyama had in mind. So he crawls once and crawls a second time, and Shin Jinseo extends on the 4th line, rock solid from black. Now here for people who are like really good with early game, another possible direction of play is for black to play the very counterintuitive tenuki. Right? Usually we don't want our opponent to play the hane like this because it puts a lot of pressure on our 3 stones. But here, because black has a very low stone on the 2nd line, this is possible. Because even if white gains an influence over here, this is all cancelled out by black stone over here. While black is facing a very bright side where he can still build a lot of potential. So that is also a possible continuation. In the actual game, Shin Jinseo likes this type of move, which is rock solid, flawless, no weakness. And this is why he's the number 1 in the world. This is his typical style. Now, obviously, Iyama has to invade the top, and at this point, Shin Jinseo plays the pincer from the right side, right? Very well played. If you play the pincer low, this would be not ideal because white can attach on top, and this is very hard for black to deal with. Black pincers from the right side, and the next move, Iyama decides to push like this. Black hane, white hane, and here black extends, and here Iyama decides to peep at black's shape. I think here a better way for white to play, or easier, a way that's easier to manage for white at this point, is to simply play rock solid moves such as the keima, building a bit of ice space for white and also tightening black's ice space, right? So we can see this is mutual ice space. However, the problem with this move is that it's a little bit too peaceful, and the Iyama does not want that because he knows Shin Jinseo is so monstrous for late game and middle game. So he decides to drag Shin Jinseo into a fight, and let's see what happens. White pushes like this, and then immediately white peeps at black's eye shape. Now, of course, here black does not want to play moves like this. We can see this is definitely a great exchange for white, and that does not happen in a professional game. Shin Jinseo plays super solid here by playing the 1-space jump. We can see this is the root for both players. After black plays this move, we can see this stone is a lot safer and is aiming at the cutting point that a big keima has. Iyama has to go back and fix the shape. And we can already see from this point on, Iyama is starting to feel uncomfortable. And I can understand why, because when I'm watching, this part of the game as white, I'm thinking about how I would play as white here. And I feel very uncomfortable as well as white. It's just, I have a group over here, and I'm not exactly sure what I'm attacking, right? Shin Jinseo is like this grandmaster at just playing flexible and dodging fights. When I play here, I'm not sure what my target is. Right? I'm just trying to. I feel like I'm punching, but I'm punching into the water, and that's how I feel as white, and that's exactly I think how Iyama also felt. Even if he's one of the best players in the world right now, it still feels just very hopeless. The next move, you see Shin Jinseo just playing all these proper moves, right? Obviously here you should not worry about the cutting points because whenever white push and cut, then black can connect on the other side. And then even if black gets cut off, then black can deal with the 2 groups separately, right? So the cutting is not that serious. When Shin Jinseo plays the turn here, it makes a lot of sense. First of all, weakens the 5th line stone the white has, therefore weakens white's group over here. But also this is such an important move when it comes to controlling the center. And all of a sudden, Iyama is feeling very, very uncomfortable. In the actual game, Iyama decided to attach on top, and this is definitely a clear sign that Iyama has, he had trouble to find what moves to play, and he had trouble, just finding his objectives, right? Just trying to understand what white is doing here. And that's a very dangerous sign, right? For any players, when you don't know what you're doing, right? You play moves like this, and then all of a sudden you fall behind. Now here, if Iyama goes for the push and cut, that is a possible variation, right? So white should have gone for the push and cut, in my opinion, because here, when black connects, white is going to jump on the second line, right? That's how white's going to continue. Black blocks, and here, the best move is for white to come back and connect this very fatal weakness. So we can see with this variation, Iyama was able to protect the corner and the side, and therefore white gained quite a bit of territory. But of course, here black can push first, and then black has a Tsuji in the center. This is a very strong Tsuji. White cannot Atari there. If white Atari in that direction, then black can extend. White connects, black extends, white connects, and here black connect back home. And all of a sudden, we can see these 6 stones or 7 stones are very, very heavy. Right? You can't give up on it, but if you run, then you have to run for a very long time, and probably the game is lost. If white Atari from the other side, then black connects. Here, for the same reason, white does not want to connect, because the cut is too serious. So white has to play a lighter move. If black cuts, then we can see that black solved all the problems over here, but at least white's group over here is fine, right? And white got some territory in the process. So this would be still more or less an equal position for both sides. This is how Iyama should have dealt with this very difficult situation. Of course, in the actual game, Iyama did not find it, and therefore he placed the attach on the 5th line. Very unclear move. I'm not sure what he's doing, because when black Hane and then bump into white, all of a sudden white is in a very, very difficult spot, right? If you just block on top, then I'm going to Hane, and all of a sudden black gains a ton of territory, and white's still dancing by himself in the center. So in the actual game, Iyama's plan is to extend down. It's trying to create a Mii. One is to block on the 5th line, and the other one is to push and cut and put pressure on the 2 stones that black has over here. It looks like a very good Mii, but all of a sudden, Shin Jinseo just plays a rock solid move by connecting this group over here, and we can see there's a Mii for black all of a sudden. Black is trying to push out on the 5th line, and also trying to play the tiger's mouth into the corner at the 3-3. And all of a sudden, Iyama is in trouble. Right? So here, if Iyama comes back and block, then black is going to play the Hane, or the tiger's mouth, in the corner. So that's almost a sente. Otherwise, this group is going to be in trouble. So if white plays the 2-space extension, then black extends down. And all of a sudden, we can see black gained a lot of territory in the process, and white is very weak here. This group is still not settled yet. If white plays the Hane, then we're going to go into some tactics where it's not going to work for white, because here black can push and cut. Now, obviously, white cannot capture here, because then I can Atari and capture the 2 stones. So white has to connect on the 2nd line, but here black can drag the stone out and fight. And then all what black needs to do is to crawl a bunch of times. Atari on top. This is a sente. I'm looking at the push. So white needs to connect. Black crawls, white extends, and here black can also extends into the corner. White pretty much has to make a life, right? If white plays this, then black is going to kill white in here. I'll leave you to verify this is going to be black kills white. So if white makes a life in the corner, then black is going to crawl. And then all of a sudden, we can see that even if black played a bunch of 2nd line stones, white is still under attack. This group still is under very fierce attack. It's not an influence at all. It is just an isolated group, because black is so thick over here. This is still a very hard position for white. All right, so white doesn't have the time to block. In the actual game, Iyama decides to try to fix this problem in a more efficient way by cutting on the 4th line, at least putting maximum pressure on black. But here, Shin Jinseo played like an AI. He turns first, breaking white's shape, and then Atari, and then tiger's mouth. Everything looks so calm and normal and logical. Right? And that's typical Shin Jinseo style. Like, all the moves are rock solid. With the tiger's mouth, the cutting point here is extremely serious. So Iyama decides to push on top, and Shin Jinseo connects rock solid here, and white has to come back and fix the cutting point. Black pushes, white blocks, and here Shin Jinseo gets this very big territorial move, and all of a sudden, right, whatever white was able to get here as profits are all compensated by black's tiger's mouth over here. But not only that, first of all, this group is under a lot of pressure because of the 3-3 stone, but also the cutting point is going to be a huge issue for white at this point. So now we can see white has a lot of worries, right? We can see Iyama is very busy dealing with all the cutting points. But when you look at Shin Jinseo, can you find one weakness on this board right now for black? Not really, right? Because the only thing you can find is probably a cutting point over here, but black stones here is already very comfortable. With this Atari here, black has no problem connecting home. So we can see Shin Jinseo, no weaknesses, and Iyama is just running for life at this point, right? And this is how scary the #1 in the world is right now. Just by playing a bunch of simple moves, and all of a sudden, Iyama is falling apart. Very tough. All right, so white plays the Kosumi. That's a sente. Black just answers. And here, white comes back and net the stone over here. By netting the stone over here, it indirectly protects or mitigates the cutting point over here. It's still a cutting point that exists. Black Atari, and here white goes into the corner. So here, if white spends a move to fix the cutting point. Okay, so first let's try to understand why black doesn't want to cut right now, because tactically white can still resist with this variation. We can see you cannot block anymore because I can Atari and Atari here and then capture the 3 stones, right? So because of that, black cannot cut right now. It tactically is still not very strong yet. However, after black's Atari here, then this becomes a thing because there's an extra Atari. If you do this again, right, we can see now black can block because of the tiger's mouth. So because of that, this cutting point is a very serious problem. But if white just spends a move to fix the cutting point, then black is going to peep on the second line. White connects, and here black plays out the Kosumi. And theoretically, the corner is just dead, right? When these 2 stones have, very tight liberties, this is a very famous dead shape. It doesn't matter which way you play the tiger's mouth. If you play tiger's mouth here, I can Atari and get rid of the second eye, right? Same thing with the other side. So this group is a clean dead. And that's probably the end of the game if white can't break out through here. I don't see a way to break out. And that's the end of the game probably. So when black plays the Atari here, it creates a serious miai of peeping here and cutting in the center. Both are extremely severe. So this is where Iyama is showing that why he's such a great player. Instead of dealing with his own problems, he decided to poke at Shin Jinseo's problem by taking the corner here. If black blocks, then white is going to crawl. And now we can see that black does have some problems. When black bump into white, of course, white can't cut right now because black hane and then connect here. We can see this is going to be black kills white. However, white can hane first. If black blocks, then we can connect. If black connects, then now we can cut. And all of a sudden, this is probably going to be black resigning soon because either these 4 stones are going to die or the group in the corner on the side are going to die. So this obviously doesn't work. Right, which means at this point, black has to connect, which allows white to connect back. And this group is under attack all of a sudden. Right, so that's where Shin Jinseo has to be very careful. But of course, for him, this is all too easy. He just blocks on the other side, and the problem is solved. White crawls, black extends, and white extends on the second line, still threatening the life and death of Shin Jinseo. And the next move just shows the confidence, right? The confidence and the ability to maintain the lead as the #1 player in the world. Just blocking here, right? This would be a move that a lot of my viewers would have played as well. And that's exactly what Shin Jinseo is playing. Just make a life very clean, very clear, and nothing Iyama can do. It's very, very tough, right? So after this, white gained a lot of profits in the corner, which means this is very well played by Iyama. However, the question is not answered. There's still a very serious cutting point, and there's a dead group on the left side. So still a very tough game, and this attack didn't solve anything. So at this point, Iyama says, you know what, the life and death here is more important. Therefore, he plays out the tiger's mouth to fix that. But of course, when Shin Jinseo extends, Iyama has to spend another move to take care of this group. If, once again, Iyama is worried about the cutting point, then the group on the left side will be bullied very hard. So for example, black will jump and hane. So white's not going to die. White can cut here. Black extends, white Atari, black Atari, and here white takes. Make sure you don't play a mistake like this. That will lead to a double Atari. Black can instead just extend, and everything is enclosed, which means white has to go back and make a life. And black's capture here is a sente, and that's such a painful part for the professionals, especially for professional players. This is so tough. This exchange is very tough to see. So at this point, we can see black gained a strong corner, and also the outside is very complete. White cannot break out, and therefore this is obviously a leading game for black. So white doesn't have the time to fix the center. White really had to play this Kama to slide out. And at this point, obviously, after all the preparation work, Shin Jinseo decided to cut in the center. White now has to deal with the two groups. It's just something that you can't avoid anymore. So black extends, white extends, and here black turns in the center. White has to connect, and black jumps towards the center. So here, if white just jumps out like this, that would be falling into a trap because Shin Jinseo is going to play the monkey face. This is a sente. And this move is very threatening because black's push on top is always a sente against the corner. So here, if white decides to counterattack, then black will play the bamboo. This fixes the weakness, but also is peeping at white's weakness. So white has to connect, and at this point, when black plays out the Kosumi, this group is pretty much dead, right? First of all, black can extend out or run the stone, and then these guys are going to die. But after you fix that, my push here is a sente. We can see this group is very dead at this point. So white cannot play like this, right? So Iyama sees that, and he had to play the Kosumi, putting pressure on black stones as well, and that's the only way to save him. Black Atari, white connects, and here black extends towards the center. White now plays the jump. This is a very professional move, right? A lot of my viewers would probably thinking about just running towards the center. This makes a lot of sense. However, this would be too easy for Shin Jinseo to handle because you're just running for your life. Instead, a professional move is to jump over here, looking at the counter attack, because white is also aiming at black's cutting point. And that's exactly what you should do when your dragon is in trouble. Black plays a Kama in the center, that's a sente. White has to make sure that this group survives. And at this point, black attaches out. This is the best way to cut off the connection and also mitigate the cutting points. White pushes and black extends. And at this point, when white hone, black extends. White pushes, and here black cuts in the center to cut off the two stones, which strengthen the center for black. Black hone, white cuts, and black cuts, white connects. And at this point, Shin Jinseo plays the Atari here, rock solid move. White hone, black hone, and here white double hone. Black extends, white keeps pushing. So the reason black cannot go for this counter attack is because white can connect in the center. Now, if black adds a move here, then white will also add a move and try to go for a liberty fight. We can see this dragon has a lot of liberty. And this would become quite chaotic. And it's not something that Shin Jinseo wants to see when he's leading in this game. So if black extends to take care of the center, then white is going to block over here. And all of a sudden, this becomes very complicated. First of all, white is aiming at the cut here. So black has to fix that. But at this point, white can just Atari, 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 and then Atari. And we can see that white just gets himself out. And this is not a great position for black anymore. So this is a little trap that Iyama is setting up for Shin Jinseo. But in front of Shin Jinseo, this kind of trap is, it's too obvious. Like, no one's going to fall for it. So black extends, and it's just the right direction. When black extends once more, we can see the Moyo is just getting more and more hurt. And this is really tough, right, for Iyama. Iyama decides to extend for the same reason you don't want to play the Atari, and therefore Shin Jinseo plays rock solid, just pretending this cut doesn't exist. But after the push over here, this cut does exist, and it's very fatal. So Iyama has to go back and fix it with a double tiger's mouth. Black peeps once first, and then jump. That's a sente. White has to block. And here, black decides to punish white for the weaknesses. White pushes here. That's a very good move by Iyama. This is baiting Shin Jinseo for this. When black pushes here, of course, white got destroyed. However, this gives Iyama a chance. When Iyama hana here, all of a sudden, Iyama can go for a kill. So white is going to try to kill black here. If black can't survive, then white can come back into this game. Shin Jinseo says no to all of that business. He decided to just extend, making this game super hopeless for Iyama. Extending in the center, and this is already alive. And what's remaining is for white to deal with all the weaknesses. White extends out, and here Shin Jinseo comes back to Atari. And this move is such a well-played move. And it looks like a move that we would also have played, But when Shin Jinseo plays it, it just feels more powerful for some reason. The reason you need to spend a move here is because otherwise white is going to drag the stone back. This is looking at the cutting point. So if you fix the cutting point, then white's going to play a Kosumi. That's the shape move. Black Atari, white connects, and we can see black's center is weakened, right? And this is also, there's also a cutting point. So in this way, the game will become a lot more complex. That's why Shin Jinseo understood all of that and just plays the Atari here. Not only it's big, it's thick, and it leaves no chances for Iyama, and that's the hopeless part, right? White can't even make this game chaotic because black is just a piece of rock everywhere, and that's the tough part. All right, the next move, Iyama is still trying his best, and this is a very well played move. This does make the game a bit more chaotic, because if you just play a move like this, then black is going to play a Keima enclosing the corner, right? And then if you just go into the endgame with black, then you're losing because black just has more territory. But when Iyama plays the slide on the second line, we can see first of all, it's trying to take a lot of territory, but also threatening the life and death of the 3 stones over here. So it's very well played by Iyama, and this is allowing Shin Jinseo to invade. But when Shin Jinseo invades, the game becomes more chaotic. All right, so Shin Jinseo plays a Sente first. White has to block that, or else the group is going to have life and death issues. And here Shin Jinseo decided to invade. Iyama obviously is very happy because he has a final chance to try to come back by cutting black off. And finally, Shin Jinseo has the first weak group of the game. Shin Jinseo plays the turn, and here white blocks over here. That's more like a time Suji because black answers, right? Otherwise, there's a cut here. So black has to spend move anyway. And at this point, Iyama plays the jump here because if you try to capture the stone here, then I can capture your dragon. So the dragon is more important. So Iyama has to spend a move here. Black attaches, white Hane, and here Shin Jinseo plays very accurate. If you just cut, that would lead to very risky situations because white can extend. Black Atari, white flip Atari, black takes, white extends. And here, if black plays the Keima, then white can try to kill black in this way. So then black has to go for life and death. So even if black can manage to live inside, this would strengthen the formation that white has here, which means white can probably come back and kill the corner. So that's not a great idea for Shin Jinseo. So Shin Jinseo's tactic, very solid. Just playing the clamp, that's the correct move. If white pushes, then black cuts, then obviously that's not going to work. If white connects, then black is going to push and cut and then push here. That's a Sente. I'm trying to Atari. When white extends, here we can block on the second line, and we can see that these guys are just dead. So that also does not work. In the actual game, Iyama plays the Atari. Black pushes through, and at this point, Iyama decides to push over here. The idea is because this formation is too weak. Black has a push and cut, and white is broken into pieces. So Iyama is trying to play the most efficient move to fix the cutting point. And at this point, we first, for the first time, we have a slight mistake by Shin Jinseo. And that's that's just so crazy. He has made the first mistake of the game, that is the Hane here. And this mistake doesn't even allow white to completely come back into this game. So here, what Shin Jinseo should have played. Now, the reason this is not such a great move from their perspective is because this move doesn't generate as many points. Because black's group here is pretty safe, so black should have gone for the tiger's mouth. With this tiger's mouth, we can see black is able to gather more territory. Now, if white tries to disconnect black, then black can connect back like this. When white turns, black Hane, white has a wedge. That's a very good Tsuji, but here black also has a Tsuji to counter that. That is just to make the empty triangle. Of course, white can cut, therefore white has to connect. When black connects, if white cuts, then black has no problem living inside white's territory, right? So this is a Sente. I'm looking at the push. So I don't think anyone would have any problem to make this group live, right? Even my viewers would have a very easy time to survive here as black. So that's what Shin Jinseo should have played. However, Shin Jinseo plays the Hane here, and Iyama decides to go for the kill. A more precise move for Iyama to play is to play the squeeze. When black connects, white simply extends. Now with these moves, white was able to fix all the weaknesses here and also enclose a bunch of points. Comparing to the previous variation where black plays the tiger's mouth, white gained a lot more points. And this game would become a lot closer, still a leading game for black, but already very close. So that was why the Hane here was a bit of a mistake from Shin Jinseo. All right, in the actual game, Iyama did not detect that, and he went for the kill. He still thinks he's very, very behind, and he went for the kill. That's very understandable. Right? So this group now is a bit in trouble. But instead of responding here, Shin Jinseo plays the push, and this shows you why he's the #1 in the world, because he understands that he should not immediately respond to this, right? Because it's not so obvious how white is going to survive. If black plays the attach, then white is going to Hane. Black cuts, white Atari, black extends, a white Atari, black Atari, and white takes. Here, black has to connect. The problem here is white can clamp first. When black pushes, then white can just make himself alive. And we can see that white is alive, and what about black? How do you survive here, right? It's not so easy. Like black has ways to counterattack, but this does require a lot of precision, and it's possible for Shin Jinseo to make a mistake. In the actual game, Shin Jinseo decides to not immediately worry about life and death and just aim at white's weakness. White blocks, and here black pushes. White blocks, and black cuts. And here Iyama plays out the losing move of the game. Here Iyama should have stayed patient. I know that Iyama has been suffering this entire game because it feels like he was playing against an AI almost. But a lot of times it's like the same thing in life, right? When we're in a difficult situation, it's very important for us to just be rock solid and not make obvious mistakes and wait for our opportunities to come. And this is exactly what Iyama should have done. Of course, that's easy said than done because first of all, Iyama is, he's close. I think he's almost 40 years old, 37 years old, if I'm not mistaken. So obviously, in terms of energy and calculation, he's not as sharp as Shin Jinseo. And also, it's just a matter of it's just a matter of cardio, I guess, at this point, right? Like at this point, both players are tired. Of course, Iyama is more tired. And when you're tired, it's easier to make impulsive moves. And the next move is a typical impulsive move. Here, what Iyama should have played is to connect. So no matter what, Iyama cannot give up this group. This group is too big. So you have to connect here, making sure it's alive. Black is going to extend. White blocks the Titan Black's Liberty, and here black has a first line Tetsuji. That's a very famous Tetsuji. It's looking at the throw-in and Atari, so white has to connect, and black can Hane. White pushes, black extends, and here white can squeeze over here. Black connects, that's a Sente, white makes the second eye, and here black can turn over here to fight in the corner. So I was saying, here black has ways to counterattack, but the correct move for black to do so is to by blocking here. When black blocks here, it puts a lot of pressure on white's corner as well. White has a few variations. One is to survive in the corner, in which case black can just play the Kosumi and attack the stone here, and black will have no problem. If white goes for the kill, then black can also go for the kill, right? My group here is very uncomfortable, so is your group on the left. So black can go for the attack instead of the defense, and this would also be a leading game for black. If white plays out the Kosumi in the corner, then black can play, of course black can still go for the attack, but here black also has the possibility to play this move. When white plays the Kosumi, black's in a push. If white extends, then black is going to block like this. White has to survive, right? If you connect, yes, this is dead, but what about your dragon? Once again, the dragon is in trouble, so white cannot do that. White has to make the dragon, drag it back home, basically. And at this point, black turns, white squeezes, and black cuts over here. This becomes a very complex Liberty fight. White can still resist, but eventually this is going to be a favorable position for black. So if the game plays out like this, right, it's still very complex. And I think Iyama still has a bit of chances, right? Especially in a fight like this. I think Iyama is a great fighter, and therefore he has some chances. So this is what a very perfect theoretical, perfectly rational Iyama should have done. But of course, Iyama is not a god. He's not an AI, right? He's a human. So he plays the Atari here, and that made the position collapse. Black Atari on top. Here, white cannot Atari. If you Atari, we take Atari, black connects, and white has a million cutting points. So that is game over. So at this point, Iyama has to capture the stone on the third line. Black pushes, and white now cuts. So Iyama is reading is trying to go for this fight instead, where first of all, he sacrificed the entire group over here. It's 30 plus points, and Iyama gets the compensation by cutting in the center. Black connects, and here white Atari. White cannot just connect. If white connects, then black can make a clean alive. Black can Atari first, then Atari, and here black squeezing here is a sente, right? White has to take, and here black can cut. White Atari. Of course, white can't go for a trade, right? Like, this is not okay for white. So white has to capture the stone, which means black Atari is a sente, and come back play the double tiger's mouth, and black is a clean alive. And of course, that's over, because even if you manage to kill the corner, it's not going to compensate for this. I mean, it's good that you capture the corner here, but it's not going to compensate for the loss over here, right? That's what I'm saying. So if white wants to win, white has to slaughter both groups, which is very difficult, obviously. In the actual game, white Atari here, that's a better move to fix the Aji. However, the Aji is not over. Shin Jinseo attaches, white bumps into black, and black now connects. That's a sente. White has to connect, and at this point, black goes for the fight. So here, Shin Jinseo's reading is flawless, and this is really the last fight. So black push over here, white cuts, black turns, and here white cannot extend. If white extends, then black can clamp on the second line, and this is a very famous shape where black kills white. So white has to play the Hane. Black Atari, white flip Atari, black takes, white Atari, and black connects. Looks like this is not going to work for Shin Jinseo. When white pushes over here, black cuts, white connects. So locally, this is going to be white kills black. However, Shin Jinseo wasn't really trying to survive here. He only wants to make the corner alive. And therefore, with the Hane here, this is pretty much like the end of the game. Because if white plays the turn here, then black can throw in, or black doesn't have to throw in, right? We can see this doesn't work for white. So in the actual game, white captures the 6 stones over here, and black gets the Atari at the 2-2. When white takes, black is already alive, and here, black plays the turn over here. And that pretty much marks the end of the game. Maybe a slightly better move for Shin Jinseo is to play the Keima, but it doesn't really matter. At this point, it's just 2 behind. Now let's calculate a little bit the points, right? Like to see how bad this is for Iyama. So first of all, this group is 46 points over here. I've already done the counting for you. So 46 points plus here, it's about 15 to 16 points. Let's just say it's it's around 60 points, the 2 groups together. Let's first not count black's group here and the black's group over here. So we see that the 2 groups over here are already 60 points. What about white? This group is 38 points. And this group, we can pretty much see there's a 2x4, which is about 8 points. Let's be a bit more generous. Let's say 9 points. So 38 plus 9 is 47 points. Here, black's Atari is a sente. Otherwise, white's going to have life and death issues. So we can pretty much see, we can pretty much count it like this, right? So white has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So 5 points, maybe 6 points, right? Let's just be generous, and then let's just say 7 points. And then we said there's a so this was 38 points plus 9 points to 47, right? And then we say 7 points here, so it's about 54 points. 54 points, or maybe 53 points. Black's outside was 60 points. So these 2 pieces of territories combined is like white's whole board plus Komi. So black's advantage is this group plus this group over here. Right, that's the simple way of doing the count. Of course, that's a very, very over simplistic, like crazy count, but it's not super off, right? Just to say that Shin Jinseo is leading by way too much at this point. All right. So in the actual game, Shin Jinseo plays a very solid move. Of course, that's a bit of loss in terms of territory, but Shin Jinseo does not care. He just has too much. All right. So here, Shin Jinseo cuts here. That's a very nasty Tsuji. White cannot connect. If you connect, then black is going to Atari. So white has to capture inside, which means black pushes first and the turn over here. And later on, there's Atari and the clamp on the second line, which we will see. So white Hane in the corner, testing Shin Jinseo's life and death. Shin Jinseo says that must be a joke, right? I bump into here, and then I play the tiger's mouth, and black is perfectly fine. Even if white gets this exchange first, black is still going to be alive with this move over here. All right, in the actual game, white extends, black plays the empty triangle, and of course we can see very 2 clear eyes. At this point, white connects in the center, and black plays an extra move over here, protecting the cutting point. White connects, black connects, and here white connects on the second line. Black obviously will take care of the endgame here, Atari, and then clamp on the second line. A very classical Tsuji. Atari on the first line, white takes. That's a sente for black. Black captures, and white spends a move to make sure his group is alive. Black Hone, white capture, and black Atari. At this point, Iyama decided to resign. The last couple moves is just for Iyama to I guess to reflect on this game a little bit, right? This is something that professionals like to do. Play a few more games just to calm down and then resign. And that's exactly what happened. All right. So in this game, we have witnessed the insane and scary power of Shin Jinseo, right? Almost like a perfect game from him. And Iyama at this point has been eliminated. And of course, he has done very well, right? Throughout this Nongshim Cup. And he has defeated 3 world champions. And of course, against Shin Jinseo, it's always a hard game, no matter who it is. So now we're left with 3 players, the 3 best players of each country, right? So there's Shin Jinseo, there's Wang Xinghao, and there is Weiqi, right? So it's Korea, China, and Japan just bringing out their best players, and then they're gonna fight, 2 more games. There are 2 more games coming. The next game is gonna be Shin Jinseo versus Wang Xinghao, which is going to happen, I think, tomorrow. I think it's tomorrow. So I'll definitely have my commentary out as quickly as I can. Of course, I've been very busy these days to cover the Nongshim Cup. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you leave a like. That really helps me out in terms of the YouTube algorithm. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't. That's the only way to make sure you don't miss out on a future commentary like this. As always, I will see you guys in my next video.